Hey everyone, welcome back to the Oh How Healthy podcast. So this episode I recorded with Jess Procini, and she is the founder of Escape from Emotional Eating. In this episode we talk all about what is emotional eating, how to determine if you are an emotional eater, the differences between emotional eating and eating disorders, what to do to heal your relationship with food if you feel like you are an emotional eater, if you find out through this episode that you could be. And I always address, since I know that there's busy women who are listening to this show, what an average woman who doesn't have a lot of time, doesn't have a lot of energy can do to start to overcome this emotional eating, and how it doesn't have to take a lot of time or energy out of your already busy schedule. And we even talk a little bit about how we can address emotional eating with children and what sort of signs to look for if we feel like our child is emotional eating, or really just how to bring this up to children so that it doesn't have to be, an awkward kind of conversation. This is something that we all could deal with even at a young age. So I hope you really enjoy this episode. It was so amazing talking to Jessica, and her information will be in the show notes if you want to reach out to her. So please enjoy. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Oh How Healthy podcast. I have a special guest for you today, and her name is Jess Procini. And so, hi Jess, how are you? Welcome to the show.
So excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you are very welcome. I know that, your work is very valuable. It is something that the listeners I know are going to appreciate and want more of. And so can you tell us a bit about yourself, introduce yourself to everyone?
Sure. So I'm Jessica Procini. I'm an emotional eating healer and the founder of Escape from Emotional Eating. And I'm on a mission to help others use food as fuel instead of a way to cope, soothe, or escape their busy, stressful lives. And I really created this work from my own personal journey with emotional eating, first discovering that I was an emotional eater, then really setting out to heal it because a lot of different modalities did not resonate with me. And when I finally did, it's become such a passionate, driven mission for me to support other people in doing the same healing work and finding the same freedom from food that I did.
Yeah. And that's why I really love hearing and listening to your work, because you said more recently, in the past couple years, right, you discovered that you were emotionally eating, even though you were doing this work already, right?
Yeah, so I emotionally ate my way through nutrition school, and I didn't know it.
Yeah, it's so ironic.
We never
Yeah.
had any courses on emotional eating or the psychology of food. And it wasn't until I had graduated from nutrition school, I had been like one of your like basic health coaches for a few years. I was working out every day. I was even teaching fitness classes, and I was continuing to gain weight. And even worse was that I really felt out of control with food. It was always on my mind. I was always thinking about it. I was like always hyper controlling with it, like meal planning, like prepping for hours and hours a day or a week. And it just like really consumed my life. And I remember trying to talk to people about it. Like, yeah, like last night I like really overdid it. And my friends would be like, oh, everyone does that. Like, don't worry about it. And we would like sign up for a workout class together.
Yeah. Or a cleanse.
A cleanse. Oh my God. Yeah. I did not make it through a 3 days cleanse because I was so crazy about food.
Yeah.
And I remember trying to talk to my partner about it at the time. And he was like, oh, Jessica, I'll love you no matter what size you are. And I was like, thank you so much, but how can you love me when all I want to do is crawl out of my own skin? And I remember I spent so many hours in therapy, and like I think it was like 932 hours I spent on the therapy couch. And I loved going to therapy because I could vent my feelings, and they had my favorite tea. And I just like love the coziness of the office. But then I would go home and my compulsions were still there. I would go right back to the pantry, right back to like stuffing myself with food. and just really feeling hopeless. And then my last resort was really Overeaters Anonymous. It felt like, okay, you know, health coaching isn't working, therapy isn't working. I guess like I got to go to Overeaters Anonymous. But I come from a long history and many generations of alcoholism, that trying to get myself to go to a 12-step program for eating was like, I just couldn't do it. It was way too triggering, way too shameful. And I didn't have hundreds of pounds to lose. I just didn't feel like that was a fit for me. And it was then where I was like, there has to be a better way. There just has to be another way. And that was really when I dedicated myself to investigating every single nook and cranny of my relationship with food, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And that was when things really started to change. I discovered I was an emotional eater, even though I wasn't hundreds and hundreds of pounds overweight. I discovered that I was using food to push down a lot of my stress and anxiety and fear and overwhelm. And that in order to heal it, I had to get to the roots. And that's everything that I now do, is like really healing the roots of emotional eating. And that's when everything changed, where food now is fuel to me. It's a nourishing asset. I have a peaceful, loving relationship with it. I still love it, but it's not something like I have to have. Like, it's not something that like consumes me. I eat, I stop when I'm satiated, and I move on. And it's like such a simple, clear relationship with food, where it used to be so chaotic.
Oh my goodness, you hit on so many different points. I want to talk to you forever, and I know it's unfortunate because we have a limited time today to talk, but we're definitely going to have you back on. But I don't think we ever talked about this before, that I actually come from a line of addicts and alcoholism, and I had eating disorders growing up, and it was just a way. I don't know if that's part of our heredity, that was kind of how we dealt with it. And so that's interesting that you say that. And the same thing, like I would go through outpatient facilities and all these different programs, and nothing really worked until I decided I was ready and I dug in to figure out, okay, what is it that's going on? And I found like it would be those triggers that would set me off. Maybe I would walk into the house and I would notice I would go right to the pantry, but it's because it was all the shoes or all the by the foyer or like the mess, like and so I had to deal with those things in order to overcome that overcome that. And so that's what you're saying, right? That's the bulk of it, how you healed.
Yeah, so two things in that. One, that emotional eating is different than alcoholism or eating disorders, in that emotional eating is a learned behavior. It's often an unconsciously learned behavior, but it is a learned behavior where we associate food with a way to escape, with a way to escape uncomfortable feelings or sensations within our bodies and within our lives. And emotional eating is a learned behavior that must be unlearned. It is not a disease. It's not an addiction. It's not something that we have to like live with for our entire lives. And I speak directly from my own experience because, yes, I'm conscious of my relationship with food, but the way I engage with it is no longer the way I used to when I was an emotional eater. So that's first and foremost, is that emotional eating is a learned behavior. And very much like what you're talking about is like, I had to unlearn, right? I had to unlearn these different associations and unconscious habits so that it could really be food again. It could be fuel. And then from there, yes, triggers are they're the beginning of the emotional eating cycle. But the thing when it comes to triggers that we have to keep in mind is that it's not the thing that has the power over you. So for example, you brought up like seeing shoes, right? It's not the shoes that have the power over you. It's your association in your brain that you're making with the shoes and what that means about you. So someone could look at their email and see so much email and have an unconscious association and say, wow, I have so much to do. I don't have enough time to do it. I'm not enough. And that will then that will fire off the emotional eating cycle.
So could emotional eating lead to an eating disorder possibly?
Yes, it's sometimes wrapped into it. Like it's sometimes like a package, like comes with the package.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that I work with sometimes have histories of eating disorders, but they're not in the full-blown bulimia or, that they're like, that has been healed, but it's showing up in this unfinished business of emotional eating.
Very interesting.
So a lot of times people have already like done the emotion or the eating disorder work, and it's like, this is the last part. This is the unlearning that we have to do.
Oh, okay. I see. So what are some things that someone can do if to determine whether or not they're an emotional eater?
So I think what's helpful is just understanding like what is emotional eating. And the way that I define it is that emotional eating is using food for a purpose other than fuel. So emotional eating is using food for a purpose other than fuel, meaning you eat when you're stressed, overwhelmed, anxious, scared, bored, frustrated, bored again, any emotional or energetic reasons that we use food is emotional eating. And some examples are like if you have no idea what hunger feels like. If you have no idea when you're hungry, you just eat because it says it's 12 o'clock and that's just what you do, right? There's like a complete disconnection from your body and your body's language. Or maybe you have no idea what it feels like to be satiated. And I had someone tell me she was in her 70s and she was telling me how her mom put her on diet pills when she was just 7 years old. And she's gone like 70 years of her life where she has no idea what it feels like to be satiated. And she's thin, and from the outside she looks really healthy, and she's a beautiful older woman with a lot, she's super smart and successful. And she was like, I eat really healthy and I can like manage my weight, but she was like, I have no idea what it feels like to be satiated.
Wow.
And that just breaks my heart because feeling satiated is also like a sense of fulfillment, right? Like that our needs are met, that we're taken care of. So it goes a lot farther than just like food when it comes to this work. But how do we know if we're emotional eaters? Is that we're using food for a purpose other than fuel. And it doesn't matter how much you eat. It doesn't matter whether you're eating healthy or unhealthy. What matters is why you are eating.
So can it be unconscious and conscious? Because let's say you are aware, you're like, listen, I'm stressed and I know chocolate's going to make me feel better. And I'm just going to eat it anyway.
Yeah, so that's what I call the I'm aware and I don't care syndrome. Like I'm aware that I'm emotionally eating and I don't care.
Yeah.
And that's a really actually very dangerous pattern because it comes with even more self-destruction and self-sacrifice and just real like I really don't care about myself. That's essentially what we're saying is like I really don't care that I'm going to have adverse effects of this behavior. I don't care that it's going to make my stomach hurt or feel bloated or I'm going to wake up the next day hating myself. All I care about is getting this chocolate in me so I don't have to feel stressed.
Yeah.
And there's so many other ways that we can manage stress that we don't have to engage in that behavior.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's say someone is realizing right now that they could very well be an emotional eater. What are some things that can bring it to the forefront and that they can do to help overcome it?
So one of the things and powerful tools that I offer is a free quiz on my website. And my website is escapefromemotionaleating.com. And you can go on there, enter your name and email, and there's a short quiz that will be really eye-opening and help you discover if emotional eating is going on for you. And even if you already know you're an emotional eater, I highly recommend taking the quiz because it is really eye-opening and the questions are pretty deep, where you will definitely learn something new. So the first thing that I recommend is go to the website escapefromemotionaleating.com, enter your name and email, and take the quiz. Then from there, once we know emotional eating is going on for you, then it's really about breaking the cycle. And this is everything that I teach in my programs and retreats, is the pathway out of the emotional eating cycle. So one of the first things that I do with all of my clients is called building emotional fitness. So it's called emotional eating for a reason because it has everything to do with our emotions. And one of the things that I realized through my emotional eating journey was that I really started and dedicated myself to my healing journey in my mid-20s. But I had been emotionally eating, since I was 6 years old. My first memory of emotional eating was when I was 6 years old. I was in my neighbor's basement with my brother and the neighbor, and they were playing video games. And I just remember being bored. And I remember going upstairs and no one was home, and pulling up a chair to the counter and putting my little hand into the cookie jar and eating all of the cookies in the entire cookie jar. And I remember putting the lid back on, putting the chair back, and going back downstairs like no one would remember or know. And immediately my brother called me out. He was like, "You ate all those cookies, didn't you?" And I was like, how did he know? Like, how did he know? I cleaned up. It's not on my face. But somehow he knew. And I remember that was my first emotional eating memory. So we start with building emotional fitness because the time that we start emotionally eating is the time that we stop emotionally growing. So even though I was 25, I had the emotional capacity of a 6-year-old. And that is the growth that we need to start to build so that food can really move back to being fuel. So the first step is building emotional fitness. Then from there, we really focus on untangling physical hunger from emotional hunger. And yes, we have two different kinds of hunger, the physical and the emotional. So our bodies need to be physically nourished, and we need to know when we're physically hungry and when we're satiated, and to be able to honor those boundaries. But then there's this whole unspoken, untapped world of emotional hunger. And we as humans have four main emotional needs that if those needs are not met, we will not grow. We will not move forward. We will not take risks in our life because we don't feel safe. So we have to nourish both the physical body and the emotional body, and know how to do that consistently so that food isn't filling in those gaps. And then from there, we start to move into what I call clearing out the mental junk food so that we have a clean, clear mental space and we're not thinking about food all the time. And then we really start to get into the roots of emotional eating and really focusing on rooting it out for good.
Okay, yeah. Now, do you find that, let's say you're working with a client and she's working on overcoming emotional eating, but maybe her emotions will, let's say she starts to become obsessed with the gym or lends her energy to work or something else. Do you notice that kind of translation with clients?
So usually an obsession with the gym is really coming from a place of control, and sometimes is really coming from a place of fear, like a fear of our bodies and a fear of like our bodies can't handle it, or there's something wrong with our bodies, so we have to like over exercise. I was absolutely addicted to exercise. It was really a way that I thought would heal my emotional eating, but actually made it worse. So one of the things that I teach in my programs is really about understanding the kind of exercise, and I call it movement. I actually don't even call it exercise. The kind of movement that your body needs and how frequently to do it to feel your best. But recognizing that really exercise is not the way to heal emotional eating. It is a tool to feel good in your body, but it is not a way to erase what we ate the night before. And then as far as work goes, like both of these things are what I call like fillers. We can like fill our schedule, we can fill our lives with so much busyness.
Yeah.
And the busyness is simply another way of numbing. It's another way of saying, I don't want to look at what I'm going through, so I'm just going to fill my schedule so that I don't even have a moment to take a breath to even consider what's really going on here.
Yeah.
And that's something that I call binge scheduling, is in the same way that we'll like stuff our bodies with so much food that we feel sick, that we will also stuff our schedules with so much stuff that we don't even have the opportunity to feel our own feelings or to even consider how we feel or what we need.
Do you think that could be intentional and unintentional? Because I know a lot of the women listening are like busy as their main concern. Time management is their number one concern. And they're like, I'm not doing this intentionally. I just can't control the situation.
Yeah, so sometimes it is conscious and most times it's unconscious. We don't recognize like, oh, I'm saying yes to all these things because if I actually slow down for a moment, I'm afraid I'll be seen as not enough. So there's like a real resistance to taking a break because of the fear of what we'll find in the space and the fear of what we may feel in the space. There was one other thing I wanted to say, and I'm now having a brain fart, so I think it'll come back around about that. But yeah, it'll come back.
Do you think like mindfulness in general can bring light to this topic? Like, let's say that busy woman just maybe finds 5 minutes in her morning to just say, okay, maybe she's planning in her head what she might try to do or not do, or just to bring some attention to the subject?
Yeah. So awareness is the first step. And I hate saying that because it's so like overplayed, but it really is. And that's what mindfulness is. It's just awareness, right? Just like being present in our bodies. But a lot of times for emotional eaters, we'll have a hard time being present because we feel pulled in so many different directions. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It's like, oh, I know I need mindfulness. I know I need to be more present with myself. And it's really freaking hard. And that's where I created the Escape from Emotional Eating energy management tools, because just being mindful felt like torture to me when I was emotionally eating. Like the last thing I wanted to do was sit with myself anywhere. let alone like 5 minutes in the morning. So I needed a tool and tools to support me in being able to manage and be present and train me to be like present and mindful, because I just wanted to crawl out of my skin. It just felt like torture. I mean, that's why we eat, is so that we don't have to be mindful, that we don't have to face ourselves, and we don't have to really change.
Yeah. It's interesting it can be difficult, to find that 5 minutes with ourselves, or to want to sit with ourselves, or to be nice to ourselves. And it's really sad to see. And I mean, I know firsthand that was exactly what I dealt with. But instead of trying to be like super positive about the situation, I would just go neutral. Like, okay, I don't have to hate this or hate myself or hate sitting with myself, but I can just go like on the emotional scale, like one step forward, and that kind of helped a bit, just going neutral.
Anything helps, right? Like even just the smallest step in the right direction is progress. And I think that's something that also can really discourage emotional eaters, is that it can feel like this really big, unwieldy thing that we have to heal, and it can feel overwhelming. But in reality, we break it down, right? We're not expecting to heal emotional eating in the next 24 hours. It is a process. And like I said, it has to be unlearned in the same way that we all started riding a bike, just with training wheels. And then now we can get on bikes and ride at any time.
Yeah, through that consistent effort and heart. And
The thought I was going to share earlier came back.
Good.
So when it comes to busyness, if we are so busy that we are having a hard time nourishing ourselves in a healthy way, then we are busy doing the wrong things.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because feeding ourselves nourishing, healthy, fueling food is the basic method of survival. Like, if we don't eat, we die. And I don't think people really recognize that, because there's so much going on in our lives, and technology does not help, right? And we're just inundated with so much stuff all the time that we lose sight of what we need to do to take care of ourselves. So if we are so busy that we don't have time to eat lunch, or we don't have time to make a healthy choice, then we really have to look at, what are you doing? And where are you saying yes when you really need to be saying no?
Which is a whole nother topic for another podcast episode. But yes, you're exactly right. And we're so inundated, not only with all of technology and all that stuff, but diets and healthy this and healthy that, and we're just so confused in general, about what to do.
The diet culture is like the worst thing for human existence.
I know.
Because we have no idea how to take care of ourselves. That's insane.
Yeah, that's why when I talk to people, my clients and the women I work with, I'm like, we are going back to basics, okay? We're whole foods, fruits, veggies, nuts, seeds, grains, dairy, meat, and then we'll figure out what we need to move around and extract and refine. And then it's cheaper that way. It's affordable that way. And it can be overwhelming when you come home with a pile of sweet potatoes and like some broccoli and chicken. You're like, what the heck am I supposed to make? Like with this kiwi and these bananas. So that's a whole nother element, but it's like going back to basics with it all, which is, why I strive to teach that to children and adults. So that brings up another question. Would you, because we both brought up our childhood, and how that could or could not have affected us. Do you think that there's a lot of parents who listen to the show? Do you have any tips for them to try? Because I know a lot of parents will say to me, I just want to make sure I'm saying the right things or doing the right things or teaching the right things. So would you have any tips for the parent who's just looking to do the right thing for their child and avoid emotional eating?
Yeah. So this is really about, like what I was saying before, is emotional eating as a learned behavior,
Yeah.
because I wish my parents knew like what I know now
Mm.
about food, because they could have taught me, they could
Yeah.
have helped me build my own emotional fitness so I wasn't reaching for food.
Yeah.
So as a parent, it's first really important for you to make sure that you've healed your emotional eating. Because even if you try to hide it, even if you're like, oh, well, I always eat in secret, no one sees me, your kids are like sponges.
Yeah.
They know what's going on even without you saying anything, and they'll pick up on how you do things. And it's not like a lot of emotional eating happens before we even get to an eating
Yeah.
experience. Like, so that's what's really important, is that it's not about whether or not they're seeing you emotionally eat. It's
Mhm.
about everything you're doing and modeling in your own emotional well-being and health. The other thing is that we have to be very conscious about how we talk about feelings. So for me, like as a child, I was a very sensitive, emotional child, and was always told that I was wrong for feeling.
Mhm.
Like, don't feel that. Shut up. Do that in your room. Get a hold of yourself. You're so sensitive. You're so emotional. And
Mhm.
these things, like, totally understand, like as a parent it can be very overwhelming when
Yeah.
your child is just bouncing off the walls with emotions, but we have to teach our children how to manage their emotional energy and how to work with their own feelings in a really healthy way, so that we aren't setting them up for unhealthy behaviors like emotional eating or addictions or things like that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I teach in my programs and retreats is how to move emotional energy through, so that we are getting it out of our bodies, but it's not, you know, we're not using food as a tool.
Mhm.
And just recently, I had my retreat called The Escape,
Mhm.
and we smashed coconuts. And you can get coconuts at your local grocery store.
Yeah.
And as a group, we went outside and we were working with specific scenarios and specific emotional
Mhm.
experiences. And I had everyone go outside, and on the count of three, we all smashed coconuts together. And everyone said that night they had the best night's sleep.
Ugh.
They hadn't slept like that in years, because we had that healthy outlet
Yeah.
for emotions. And that's something that you can start using with your children, is like, you're mad, go get a coconut, take it out back, and I'll see you in a couple minutes. Like, rather than, you're mad, well, that's not the right way to feel.
Yeah.
And then you see your kid with, the bag of cookies a couple minutes later.
Yeah.
So we have to start allowing the child to really feel the full range of their emotions in a healthy container,
Yeah.
um, so that it's not like seeping into our relationship with food.
Yeah. Or get them a punching bag or something, or like those
Punching
sock and
bag,
boppers.
punch pillow,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
ways we can move through emotional energy
Yeah.
that like don't involve cookies or cakes or chocolate or things like that.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying we can't have those things, because what's a life if it doesn't have chocolate or cake or cookies?
Yeah.
But again, it's about, why are we eating them?
Yeah.
Why are we eating the chocolate? Are you eating it to avoid and escape
Mhm.
or soothe or reward yourself? Because if so, that's emotional eating.
Yeah.
But are you using it because you still have room? You're still, physically capable of receiving that food without being overstuffed. And, you've chosen the kind that's right for you, and you're going to simply enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, I notice I'll actually use those gauges if I notice that or maybe I'm like in the kitchen, I'm lingering, maybe I get another cup of coffee, or I'm like doing something and I'm like, what am I like, what's going on right now? What am I procrastinating on? What do I have to do that I'm not doing? What is bothering me? So it's kind of like just going inward, checking in, and allowing children to do that too. Just maybe talking with them, like you said, using that language and communicating with them appropriately. But yeah, I definitely agree with everything you said. It starts with mom, and I think that that's interesting that you brought up the energy that's brought up before you even get to the restaurant or before you even eat. Maybe it's anxiousness, maybe you're working out obsessively before, maybe you say, oh, only coffee for breakfast until dinner time, and then it's definitely that cycle.
If we are trying to heal emotional eating when we're in an emotional eating experience, it's too late. Emotional eating starts way before you're sitting down or standing, leaning over this kitchen sink, eating.
Yeah.
Right? Like, emotional eating is the end of the emotional eating cycle. It's everything that happens before we get to that experience. It's about the way, the trigger, to the feelings, to the disconnect, to wanting to dissociate. And then is when we eat. So we have to keep that in mind, that it's not about the food. It's everything that happens before it and underneath it.
Yeah. And I just wanted to bring up one, to tie up our talk around kids and for the parents that are listening. Let's say, you said when you were 6 years old and you were at your friend's house eating from that cookie jar and you didn't say anything, but your brother found out. Now, let's say it was at your house and then your parents noticed, oh, the whole cookies are gone. And, your brother rats you out and says, oh, that was Jess. What could that conversation look like for the parent to have with the child? Like, what would you wish that your mom or dad or neighbor said to you?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I would want them to approach me after the experience. So not while I'm, being embarrassed by my brother. But really where there's like a safe, like as a child, I can feel safe to explore my own feelings and express them without judgment. Because the way it would have probably went down if it was a parent was I would have been reprimanded and I would have felt shame. And then I would have just hid even more. I would have been like, okay, this isn't acceptable, but I like doing it. So now I'm going to do it in secret. Where it's important, I think, to like really have curiosity and compassion as an adult when it comes to children's food behaviors. So if it were me, I would, ask my child, like, did you like the cookies? Just starting to like ask questions of like, well, what had you go eat them? And just from a very light, compassionate tone of curiosity. And just really allowing the child to express itself, because kids are pretty open, like they're very much in touch with how they feel. But it's us as adults that shuts them down, that has them disconnect from that. So just first putting them in like a great, safe, sacred space of like, hey, I'd love to talk to you about, what happened at Josh's house the other day. Are you okay talking about that now? And then, well, why don't you tell me a little bit about what happened? And did you see the cookies? Did you feel like you had to ask for one? Or, what had you eat all of them? And do you feel embarrassed about it? Or, is this something that you like to do often? And I would just be very curious, and not trying to change the child, but simply trying to collect more information. Because when we have that more information, then we can support the child in in getting what they really need, because it's never about the food. For me, when I was 6, it wasn't about the cookies.
Yeah.
It probably had to do with an emotional need that was not met at the time.
Yeah.
And really feeling either ignored or abandoned or not safe, and looking for a way that I could feed myself that emotional nourishment, but it came through in an unhealthy way.
Yeah. I think that that's important to bring up, whether we're talking to children about food or about an action at school or just anything, without it being so abrasive, and just approaching it with a place of curiosity and not pressing the issue too much, right? Because then children could shut down or not want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah, the key is like compassion,
Yeah.
right? So that we're not shaming the child and we're not embarrassing them.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the reasons why we'll emotionally eat is shame.
Yeah.
So to make sure that there's just such compassion and curiosity rather than judgment and like, let me tell you what you should do, little one.
Yeah.
Not saying that would be our intention, but sometimes it can come out that way, especially because food is a very intimate relationship that we have with ourselves. But the key is as an adult, we have to do our own work. We have to do our own work in our relationship with food so that we can support our children in creating a healthy relationship in their relationship with food.
Yeah, and their relationships in throughout the rest of their lives, like with all elements of their lives, where you're saying spiritual and physical and emotional, all of these different things. I think that it truly is healed with this basic necessity of food and our emotions tied around it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So well, our time flew. You have, you're amazing. We're definitely going to have you back on. Would you like to give everyone, I know you said your website before, but any ways that people can connect with you, whether social media or another outlet?
Yeah, so escapefromemotionaleating.com is where you can find me. And like I said before, if you use food as a way to cope, soothe, or escape, and it's holding you back, put your name and email, take that self-assessment so you can find out what to do about it. And will you put my links to social in the show notes? Okay, so you can find me on social. I tend to hang around on Instagram and Facebook the most, or YouTube as well. But Escape from Emotional Eating is the place to find me, and take that quiz so that you can find out what to do next in your relationship with food.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jess, for being here, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to continue the conversation, you can head on over to our Facebook group, Healthy Weight Loss Tips for Busy Women, where we continue the conversation. There's always a new thread for a new podcast episode where we talk further, more in depth. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me personally. My name is Jamie Youre, and you can tag me in anything. You can find me on Instagram at ohhowhealthy, and connect with us. All the details will be in the show notes, and I hope to connect with you next time.